Hello everybody and welcome back to another video in this Pygame tutorial series. In today's video I want to be explaining how we can implement a very simple jumping motion into our game. So if you've been following this series from the very beginning, then the code that I have up in the editor right now should seem familiar to you, because it is the code that we've been explaining in the first couple of tutorials. The only difference is that I have removed the possibility to move upwards and downwards on the screen using the keybinds up and down. And there's two reasons why I did that. The first reason is to just shorten the code to make it easier to replicate. And the second reason is that I don't think it makes sense to have the possibility to move upwards if you are going to implement jumping motion anyway. Alright, so that being said, let's just quickly look at where we left off last time. We had a ball that can now only move left and right and is bound to the edges of the screen. Now let's make it jump. So the first thing that I want to do is to add another velocity component and sort of differentiate between the velocity in the x direction and the velocity in the y direction. So that is going to both be 10, and in the movement code block I now also need to adjust the variable because I've just renamed it. So I'm going to call this velocity x and velocity x again. Alright, so now we have split the component of velocity into two dimensions, and the next thing we need to do is introduce a variable called jump. And by default it is going to be false, because when you're starting off the game you don't want to be jumping right off the get-go, you want to jump when you press the spacebar. Having said that, we want to write if jump is false and user input is the space key, so pygame.space, then we want to execute the following code. We want to change the jump variable to true. And if jump is true, you don't really need to write that, but I just want to make it really explicit, so you can leave is true away, but let's keep it in for now. And yeah, so if jump is true, then we want to move upwards on the screen, right? Because a jump is always upwards, so you want to be decreasing the y coordinate. If you remember in the last tutorial, I said that the top left corner of the window is the coordinate 0, 0. And so if you are moving upward, you are decreasing the y coordinate. So let's go ahead and decrease the y component by the velocity in y direction, which we just gave the value 10. And of course, when you're jumping, you are, during your jump, decreasing your velocity. Let me go ahead and show you what I mean real quick in this diagram, which I've brought up on screen. So this is basically our ball, and there's an upward arrow over here and a downward arrow over here, sort of showing you the motion of this ball. So we're starting out at the bottom, and at the bottom, when we're moving up, we have a velocity of 10 pixels per while loop iteration. And when we move up, we want to decrease the velocity in the y direction. And when we get to the very top of the jump, we are basically stationary, and there's a velocity of 0. And after we have reached the very highest point in our trajectory and start moving back down again, we want to increase the velocity again. But now you'll notice that the velocity has the opposite sign. Over here, when we're moving up, we have a positive sign, but when we are moving downwards, we want to have a negative sign. So the way we can implement this in our code is by saying that we want to decrease the velocity in y direction by 1 unit for every while loop iteration. And if the velocity in y direction is smaller than -10, we want to finish the jump by changing the variable jump to the value false again, and we want to change the value of the velocity to its original value, which was 10. So let me go ahead and show you what I mean by that in using the diagram again. So when we are moving up, we are decreasing our velocity, and then when we start moving down again, we are increasing our velocity again, but in the opposite direction. And once we get to the point at the very beginning where we left in first place, we want to stop the jump motion when the velocity that we left with is equal to the velocity that we come down with. And that is exactly what happens here. So if the velocity is -10 again, which is the velocity which we left with at the beginning of our jump, but just with the opposite sign, then we want to finish our jump. So now you'll see that if I go ahead and run the code, it should work. Oh yeah, you'll see that right now when I'm pressing the space button, I get a small jump. Now, how could we make this jump a little bit bigger? So in order to make this jump bigger, we could, for example, multiply our velocity by a constant. So let's multiply our velocity by the constant 4, for example, and now you'll see that our jump has gotten a lot bigger, but at the moment it is still pretty fast. So how could we go ahead and slow our jump down? We can slow our jump down by increasing the time delay. So let's go ahead and increase it to, let's say, 30 milliseconds. And now our jump will have slowed down. I hope you can see that. And the cool thing is that when I move to the left and right, I can also move mid-jump. So you'll see that I can move and change my jump direction mid-jump as well. So yeah, we have now managed to implement this small jumping motion into our game. And I'm going to leave it at that. If this video helped you out, then make sure to leave a like. And if you want to stay up to date on this series, then make sure to subscribe to the channel, and we'll see each other in the next video.